I'm Cora Rennie, and I can't wait for you to hear from Kimberly Ann Johnson as part of our Understanding People Pleasing Summit for women to uncover the root causes, embrace self-compassion, and create deep connections you've been craving. Kimberly Ann Johnson is a somatic experiencing practitioner, structural integration practitioner, sexological body worker, birth doula, yoga teacher, and single mom. She's the author of the early mothering classic, The Fourth Trimester, Call of the Wild, and Reckoning, co-authored with Stephen Jenkinson, as well as the audio series Reclaim the Feminine. So I discovered your work, Kimberly, probably about, I think it was around the same time I started my cranial circle training. So about the fall of like 2022. I've been an avid follower since then. And your work and the way you teach it's just been instrumental on my journey. And so for that reason, I've been really excited to have this conversation, to have the conversation and to share what you know with this audience. Before we dive in, can you maybe share a little bit about your story and how you have come to be doing what you're doing in the world today?
Well, that's a big question. I'm 50, so there's a lot of years leading up to this point.
Yeah.
Uh, a lot of incarnations. Um, yeah, is there like a specific part of my work that you want me to comment on?
Well, I guess maybe. So, what I love is that you talk specifically about the nervous system in terms of the female nervous system. And so, I guess just like how did knowledge of the female nervous system become really important to you through some of the things that happened in your life?
Yeah. Well, that was that biggest of all the turning points was becoming a mom.
Yeah.
So having studied yoga for a long time and been a body worker, and I'd really studied with Richard Freeman, who teaches that the base of all the poses is the pelvic floor. So I'd
Mm,
been immersed in the tailbone and the pubic bone and the sitting bones and everything that lives among and between them. But then I had a baby, and really, it felt like everything that I learned about spirituality and everything that I learned about my body just wasn't working. And
mm,
I had an injury and I was trying to heal myself without surgery. And it just took a really long time and I had to learn a lot. And in that time, I also heard a lot more stories from women about their pelvises, about birth, about gynecological surgeries, about sexual boundary ruptures in a way that I hadn't heard before because I had had a sexual boundary rupture, but I hadn't had a lot of gynecological challenges. So that was really a huge turning point. And then the next huge turning point was 2017 when Me Too, the second wave of Me Too happened. And all of a sudden, I saw so many women disclosing things and the momentum of the disclosures. And as somebody who had been studying the nervous system for a while and been holding space for a lot of women for those kinds of questions, I was just really reticent about where that was going to take us as a culture and where that was going
mm,
to take women as individuals. So I started talking about this jaguar work that I do. And that was another big turning point of realizing, like, wow, okay, this is the way that anatomy is taught is really women's anatomy is kind of default, and the way that the nervous system is taught is women's nervous system is kind of default. And it just solidified really like, okay, I'm doing one-on-one session work in my office, but this is a much bigger consideration that needs to go way beyond one-on-one work. And so that's when I developed the courses and when I wrote the second book, The Call of the
mhm.
Wild.
Yeah. Yeah. So I know a little bit about the nervous system, and I have an understanding that the people-pleasing behaviors can be quite like likened to the fawning response. But I am curious, like I really just in this conversation want to pick your brain. What is your perspective of um, yeah, people-pleasing behaviors and women's nervous systems and how those things intersect?
So, uh, really, it's important to talk about polyvagal theory, but not in a really nitty-gritty kind of anatomical way, although that's interesting too.
Yeah.
But when Porges put out the polyvagal theory, it really brought to the forefront that the way that we'd been regarding the nervous system was very incomplete to that point and is incomplete in various ways. And the ways that it was incomplete are actually predisposed also to kind of invisibilize female experience. So, what happened when polyvagal theory came around? Well, still in the zeitgeist, when you hear people talk about the nervous system, they say, I'm fight or flight or I'm rest and digest.
Yeah.
I'm fight or flight or I'm down regulated. And what happened when we learned more about the vagus nerve and more about how it works is that we learned that that was comparing apples and oranges. We learned that fight or flight is what happens when the sympathetic system is under stress, and rest and digest is what happens when the dorsal parasympathetic system is in safety. So we're comparing systems when they're not in similar states. So if we were to compare those two systems, which is still only partial, but we're in the older part of the nervous system, and we were to compare them in safety, it would look like a healthy fight response, healthy aggression, drive, what wakes you up in the morning, your inhale, the thing that gives you energy is the sympathetic system. And in the parasympathetic system, yes, resting, deceleration, sphincter dilation, slowing down. But if we were to compare both of those under threat, then we would have fight, which is a very specific response, flight, those are not interchangeable, they're very distinct. And then we have freezing and collapsing.
Mhm.
So that's what the parasympathetic dorsal system does under threat. uh, I'm really known for I act out a scene of a wolf and a rabbit so that you can see how those stress responses function in real time and you can identify in your own system when you're in those different stress responses because the fight is more of a predator response
Mhm.
and the flight and the freeze are more prey responses. And even though we don't like the word predator as humans, a predator prey dynamic is just part of biology, it's just part of a healthy ecosystem. And in a human system, we need to be able to occupy and inhabit the full spectrum response. So that's in the animal body. But as humans, we have another tier of our nervous system that evolved more recently. That's the ventral vagal system. So that's the social nervous system. So animals have complex social relationships, but they don't have the same kind of social nervous system. And our social nervous system is governed from our heart into our throat, behind our ears, into our jaw. The vagus nerve, it together with the trigeminal nerve and the orbital nerves, is what's in charge of this. This system developed for maternal bonding. So it developed at an 18-inch distance, the distance of breastfeeding. And it's the way that we sift for safety, looking at someone's eyes and the expressions around their mouth and in their face, as well as facial color. Like if you feel really connected to somebody, then usually you'll get a kind of a flush. And it's an oxytocin system.
Mhm.
So it's designed for bonding and it's designed for mother-baby bonding. Doesn't mean that men don't have it or that, but females are specifically predisposed for that system, that bonding system. Just like every other system that I described, there's the nervous system, the social nervous system when it's safe and when it's under threat. When we're safe in the social nervous system, that's when we feel like we can be different and we still belong. It's when we feel like we can stand out. So, if we have a different our whole family's hippies, but we like to be fancy and wear lipstick, or our family's poor, but we have money, or our family's rich and we're not really doing well financially, or our in our religion we do this, but I want to do something different. You don't feel that you're risking separation
Mm.
by being different somehow. So that's getting increasingly rare, unfortunately.
Yeah.
And social media, well, we can get into that if you want to, but like it's just basically exponentially increased some of these reactions. So when we're safe, we feel a sense of belonging. We don't feel like we have to contort ourselves or pretend that we can just be different and it's okay. We're still going to be a part of the group. Under threat, just like the other systems, there's two responses. There's fitting in, which is like camouflaging. It's like I'm just going to kind of keep my head down and sort of agree and not state what I think or be different because I don't want to risk ostracism. And then there's fawning, which comes from fawn, the actual doe, which is being wide-eyed. And fawning is people pleasing. It's being extra nice and being palatable and going along with the thing or the person that has power, whether that's a man or whether that's someone of higher status. So the idea is that if you are out on a prairie, a threat that's close to you is much less threatening than something that's farther away. So as a fawning thing, you approximate to the thing that's threatening, either because you need that status or because it's safer for you than to imagine if you didn't know where that threat was. So that response really explains a lot of what we saw in the Me Too movement, which is like, why do you keep going back there? Like, this is not good for you. Like, what are you doing? It's partially fawning, and it's partially another part of our nervous system that is seeking repair. So when we have a rupture, oftentimes it's unbelievable to us. We don't understand it. It seems impossible. We think that couldn't have actually happened. Did that actually happen? And our system returns to it almost as a way of proving that it's real. So we go back there. It's an opportunity. Our system's giving us an opportunity to be in a similar situation with a different outcome.
Mm.
But oftentimes we just end up repeating the thing because that's also a part of how nervous system wiring works. It's like if you run a groove, then you're more likely to be in that groove again. So to jump the groove, it gets a little bit more challenging. You need a little bit more input. So, from my perspective, people pleasing is something that's highly adaptive. It is partially physiological because a weaker person, like 80% of women are weaker than most men
Yeah.
physically, vulnerably. And so, uh, whether that's money or physical safety or whatever it is, there's a reason to do it. But then also there's a lot of socialization around being nice and pleasing and likability goes way down when women use certain facial muscles to express
Mm.
disagreement or resentment or other quote unquote negative emotions. So my work is a lot about helping people look angry when they are angry. Like instead of not to be angry, it's like, no, be angry, but actually like look angry. And if you're sad, then be sad. But sadness for a lot of women is oftentimes an inability to express disagreement or anger and to hold the power that's in that. And when you come out of fitting in or fawning, there's a sense that you have needs and you have wants and you are willing to state those even if those needs aren't going to get met, which is a challenge. And lastly, I'll just say um, in my courses, I do talk about this and I do help people with this, but I usually circumvent it by going into older places in the nervous system because the social nervous system, again, it's the newest, it's the highest up in the body. And sometimes when we can restore the animal power, then we just have less need to do that because we feel in ourselves our self-protective, self-defensive responses. I think a lot of therapy happens in the social nervous system,
Mm.
talk
Yeah.
therapy, and that's not my interest and it's not also my expertise. But my theory about it is that being a redhead, and now my hair is getting a little bit wider, and but I used to be like a real copper redhead, and I was teased a lot as a kid, and I wore glasses and I was really smart and I loved school and I was always telling the teacher the subs when we needed tests and but my theory is that I have never been able to be camouflaged. It's like I don't there's people like
Oh.
I have friends with dark hair and they're like, "Oh, I go to this country and everyone thinks I'm from there." And I go to this country and it's like I go nowhere and people think I'm from there. So I've just always stood out. So I'm not a big people pleaser. I'm not a big fawner. It just isn't, it doesn't, it's easy for me to state something without tilting my head or nodding or laughing afterwards or
Sure.
saying, you know what I mean? You know what I mean? Or right, right? Like I don't have a lot of those traits because it's not because I wasn't raised that way. I was raised by people with like a lot of manners and um a lot of conscientiousness towards image, but I think just being somebody who always stood out so much anyway,
Hmm.
I didn't develop those um, patterns as much.
Hmm. That's highly interesting. But also you're clearly very you know all the patterns, like you just listed off a ton of them. Like, yeah, it's pretty obvious.
Well,
Um,
I mean, I've worked with like tens of thousands of people now because in my 20s I taught yoga, so I was teaching big classes and like 20 classes a week, and then I was doing body work, and then in my 30s I was also teaching yoga but doing more. I do internal pelvic floor work. And so, so much of the work is about women wondering, why didn't I say this? Why
yeah.
didn't I do this? Why couldn't I make this movement? And so, yeah, I've been down all of these groups with many, many people grieving together with them, expressing on their behalf, helping them, defending them, helping them find their own self-defense. Because people who are highly socialized in this way, but also, I mean, there's a lot of reasons why you could develop one of these patterns as your
Yeah.
default. Um, you know, it's these things happen to come up in highly formative charged events. So
Hmm.
then, yeah, I swim in these waters, let's say that.
Yeah. Yeah. Um, so I do want to have you talk about the Jaguar work, the predator energy. You talked about healthy aggression. Because it's kind of been a theme in some of the other conversations in the summit around people pleasers tend to kind of skip over anger and kind of fall into shame. And my self-reflection in my own system, because I have all these things coupled with anger that yeah, I would prefer not to experience anger. And then it's like I have, like, it feels to me like my nervous system is fleeing from my own fight response, is what it kind of feels like. So I guess I want to hear more about what healthy aggression is. And when you talk about coming into your animal power, what does that even look like? Or what is that you're talking about?
Well, first of all, we all have a reaction, right? Some people hear the words healthy aggression and they're like, I don't even know what you mean. Like, is that even a thing? Is there such a thing as healthy aggression? Aggression is bad. Don't be aggressive. Aggressive is dangerous. Aggressive is scary. So healthy aggression is setting your sights on what you want, moving in that direction, being unthwarted in your pursuit of it. It's the hunt. It's setting your eyes
Mm,
on that thing you want and going after it. It's also mama bear energy, which is like, don't mess with me and don't mess with what's mine. So anger is an emotion that's associated with this physical response. So the physiology of the response is density, denser connective tissue, more frontal flexor muscular engagement, uh, a willingness to have your facial expressions and your vocal tone and the content of what you're saying and your whole body energy in coherence. So
mm,
you're not saying, no, no, I don't want that, right? Like all of the ways that we say one thing, but our body is saying another thing. And it's a little bit deeper than body language, although body language is a part of it. So, what makes us diminish our power? What makes us want to care for someone else's response more than we care for our own body or our own, I don't know what these
I
emoji
don't know
things
either.
pop up. Uh, so, I mean, most people that I work with, because they've been on the prey side, They don't want to be a predator. They would never want to harm anyone. They would never want to be on the other side of what they've experienced. Therefore, they're too afraid to even approach what that visceral power is. And the thing is like if you occupy that power, you don't have to use it most of the time
Mm, yeah.
because it's already clearly communicated in your system. The other day, my daughter, I have a 17-year-old daughter, and she came up to me and she was like, "Mom, I think you'd be interested in this study that I read. I think it's related to your work." And I said, "Okay, what is it?" And she said, "Well, they got all these felons together and they had them watch people walking through Times Square." And they asked them individually, like, which of these people would you attack? And they agreed, they were in agreement. And what were the people they attacked? They attacked people who looked like they didn't know where they were going. So people who didn't have like a clear focus and a direction where they were going, and people who were looking down, and people who had a collapsed posture in their chest, right? Now that's more characteristic of a parasympathetic dorsal response, confusion, disorientation, this collapse. That's not
Mm,
exactly a people-pleasing gesture. Shame usually goes there, although there is a shame that goes in the other direction. But I was impressed that my daughter clued into it because it was like, yeah, isn't that interesting that they're not picking on people who would be a good fight? They're not picking on
yeah.
people that defend themselves. You can perceive that. Are you inhabiting yourself? Do you know where you're going? Do you have a vertical axis? Or are you collapsed? And are you already in a physical posture of prey before anything even happens? So there's a biomechanical component to it as well.
Hmm. That's fascinating. Um, so I want to be mindful of our time, but I also want to ask you about in terms of maybe I don't know if it is in terms of the social nervous system, but the integration of like where sisterhood and circles and community and all of those pieces come in to healing for women.
Have you heard of the Bonobo Sisterhood?
No.
Okay. The Bonobo Sisterhood is a book written by a Harvard law professor, actually. Bonobos are primates,
Yeah.
and they're usually known for pleasure because they orgasm on their own and they're like they love having sex. That's what most people know them for. But this law professor wrote a book called I think her name is Diane Rosenfeld, but I'm not positive that that's her last name, but it's something like that. And the book is about how in this group of primates, if there's a female that's being picked on, if there's a female that like males are bullying, it's the older females that come and surround the younger females. So they don't have, I don't know what you call it in animal language, but they don't have rape. They and others do, like chimps do, gorillas do, but they don't have it in bonobos.
Mm,
So that's sort of her case is like, no, we're not going to change male behavior, but we could change female behavior. And if the elder females were willing to come and surround the younger females, then we could change this. And that's impacted my work a lot because I teach groups of women. I have a program called Motherhood Facilitators, and so Mother Circle Facilitators. Um, I teach people to lead mothers through an 8-week process. But as I'm menopausal now, and so that means that my own social nervous system is also a lot less primed. Like I don't have the estrogen. I'm not as interested in maintaining harmony and group bonding. I don't, this is why so many women get divorced in menopause. They're no longer interested in sacrificing their own needs for a relationship or for a family. They're just like, you know, y'all can make your own dinner and I'm gonna go, to my painting class or whatever. Um, so on this side of the menopausal journey with much less estrogen in my system, I'm also just much less uh, activated by social nervous system things, which are like people ganging up on you or call outs or threatening your membership in a group based on your behavior. And I'm parenting a teenager who's super primed for that, maybe more than
Mm,
ever. And so it's really interesting to be on this side of it because I can really feel what's happening hormonally for her. And it is hormonal and there is a purpose for it. And I think sometimes it's glorified like, oh, I can't wait to be a crone because then I'm going to be unapologetic and I'm not going to care. And it's not exactly that. We really need the estrogen. We need the group harmony. Like that's how families survive. That's how it's made for baby survival. All the nervous system states are. So they're all super functional for as long as they are. And then we
mhm,
get a chance to work with them. Um, Yeah, so your question was about circles and sisterhood. So I've really observed that rather, of course, I want my daughter to have like great self-protective instincts and I want her to be able to state clearly what she wants and what she doesn't want. And I want her to be able to, adapt to different environments. And I really see more than ever how when we discard older women and there's not really a place for them, we're also cutting off this really essential protective mechanism that as somebody, I'm not an elder at all, but as somebody who's aging and now on the other side of that, I see my role differently now.
mhm, Yeah, beautiful. So I do want to be mindful of your time. So can we talk about the free gift that you have for our audience?
Oh, sure. So, the sort of stenciling of the different nervous system states that I took you through a couple minutes ago, that's in the first chapter of my book, Call of the Wild: How We Heal Trauma, Awaken Our Power, and Use It for Good. And you go to my name is Kimberly Ann Johnson, and you can go to my website, kimberlyannjohnson.com/chapter, and then you get the first chapter free. And in that chapter, I also break down like how connective tissue density impacts our nervous system responses, how we move and how that impacts it. Because yes, there is our learned responses, there is our sex at birth, but there's also other things that like our connective tissue that really impact our ability to access some of these nervous system states.
That's
And I
fabulous.
also I think people who identify and say like, "Oh my God, I'm such a people pleaser." It's not really an identity, it's a
Yeah.
behavior. And I think that there's a thing that is like contrasted, like either you're like an alpha female bitch or you're a people pleaser. And I think that I'm a very polite and kind person. I don't think that I'm like just like a hard ass bitch walking around the world like talking about what I want. Like there's softness
Yeah.
inside a healthy aggression. Healthy aggression also, like jaguars don't spend their entire day hunting. They hunt when they need to be hunting, and the rest of the time they play in their den with their cubs. They lay on trees and chill out, and they walk around on the prairies. So once you have access to the full spectrum, it's not like you're walking around like a bodybuilder with your muscles flexed all the time. But the pattern that you share that you feel like you're fleeing from your own fight response, that's really important to address because there's
Mhm.
all kinds of collapse and autoimmune problems. And I mean, there's just all kinds of things that are associated with that collapse and that inability to hold something that is really about just what's okay and what's not okay with you. And it's really worthwhile because there's so much confusion. I mean, we don't need to open like the biggest can of worms ever, but I'm sure that some people listening have listened to the tapes of Neil Gaiman, Amanda Palmer, and the whole um, sexual, I don't even know what to call it, harassment, abuse, boundary violations. And they have the recordings of the young women. And now the young women are saying like that was not okay with me, but at the time they play the voice memos. It's so disturbing, and they're like, "Oh my God, last night was amazing, and it's so wonderful that I can be a part of your family, and I've always been curious about this." And if you listen to the voice memos, you can't tell at all that the
Yeah.
person was violated the night before. And that's the people pleasing behavior. That's like reality is set aside. And then how do the other people in the scenarios know what to respond to? Because if you're offering that as what's happening, it's really as females also our responsibility. Like it's if that's how we're communicating about what's happening, it's so unrealistic that other people are going to be able to decode that.
Mm-hmm. 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 Yeah. Yeah. That's important to hear. So do you have, because we do have to wrap up, do you have any like final words, like a final takeaway, something specific that you want to leave the audience with today?
I think just, you know, there's a lot out there right now. The nervous system is really hot and um, embodiment and trauma and everything, but it's really like everything has its own layer of truth to it. So if something that you heard somehow resonates, it should kind of confuse you. It really shouldn't just make sense because if it makes sense to you, then that means you already know it deeply. So if you're somewhat confused but intrigued, then that would be a breadcrumb trail to
Yeah.
follow. Uh, and there's a lot of misunderstanding that's based on morality, it's based on political views, and it's not based on biology, and it's not based on behavior. And our biology is just going to dominate those other things, even if we don't, even if we like dig our heels in and we try to outthink it and outanalyze it and outpoliticize it and outpolitically correct it, our biology is just going to win out and we can even technologize it, but still it's our biology speaking in so many different ways. So I'm a devotee of female biology personally, and that doesn't mean that I don't revere male biology. I just don't know as much about it. But I really believe that our biology has a lot of information for us. And if someone's listening, like there's just so many ways, whether it's your career or your parenting or your sex life or your relationships, that this shows up. And so many people say they're exhausted, and exhaustion is a part of a collapse. And yes, there's a lot of reasons for us to be exhausted, like social media and screens themselves exhaust us. But it's oftentimes not a lack of, it's not the exhaustion is happening because you're not doing the work it is for you to be doing. And that's usually in the healthy fight. So whether your response is generally fitting in or fawning, or whether it's freezing and collapsing, or even if it's fleeing, the healing direction is moving into a healthy fight response action, the right action. And when you have that, it's a space between the social nervous system and the sympathetic system where flow and play and improvisation
Mm.
and sense of humor and where there's space for like organic energy to move. So uh you can try to do less and do yoga nidra and take baths and do your self-care and do all those things. But if you're not stepping into the thing and practicing holding anger, practicing holding a line, then you are just going to keep being exhausted.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And so what I heard you just say is that like we have our defaults that run, but there are certain behaviors, like when you talk about the Epsom salt baths or, those that's still in that same default groove. So we're still not building the capacity and the fluency to be in all the states. Yeah. And I have not ever heard anybody talk about it that way. So that's important. Yeah. Beautiful. Thank you. I can't thank you enough for your time here today, and just sharing this little snippet of what you know and how you work with our audience. I know that everybody here will be hopping on over to your website to grab the free chapter of the book, and they'll all become devoted followers like I am. So thank you. Thank you very much.
You're welcome. Thank you.